Good morning, everyone. My name is Avel Espiritu, and I'm with Red 5 Lean Performance. I will be introducing our speaker today, and Shafraz, who had his hand up there, is with Ask for a Better World, and he'll be co-facilitating the session today because I got to bow out about halfway through. So some housekeeping before we begin. We will be muting everyone during the presentation today, so don't forget to unmute yourself before talking during the Q&A portion of our session. And we will be recording this session for those that couldn't make it today, and or you have to leave a little bit early because we all kind of daisy link our meetings back to back. So you have to leave. That's okay. All right. Now, on that note here, we are a part of a community or committee of volunteers that run the Edmonton Lean Community of Practice, also known as Lean-YEG. We host a Lean coffee session on the third Friday of every month, and we run from September through June, and it runs from 9 a.m. to about 10 a.m. Sometimes it varies. It's in virtual, like this format today. Sometimes it's in person, and at these events, Lean practitioners, we meet and we discuss and learn about our favorite topic, which is Lean in our community. Sometimes it's a structured, agendaless, yet laughter-filled conversation on Lean. But today, especially the virtual ones, is going to be a presentation from one of our local practitioners who are going to share their Lean journey. So I would be honored to introduce this person. And I want to say that today's Lean practitioner was instrumental in bringing integrated project delivery to the Edmonton Public Schools. To date, her team has completed 7 IPD new build projects. The division has also completed a number of IPD projects to provide small maintenance upgrades across multiple schools. And she recently led her department through a major integration between the project management team and the division's maintenance department. And this combination of expertise has been foundational in generating Lean practices and collaboration from inception through the life cycle of the division school buildings. Now, she's also a strong advocate for developing collaborative methods to deliver projects and school maintenance to support students and division staff across Edmonton. Now, personally, I've had the pleasure to work with her on one of her A3s, and I remember vividly this moment where she had this epiphany between leaders who give answers and leaders who have a beginner's mindset to be open to many possibilities. And those leaders are able to nurture constant improvement in those around them and are the most natural and effective leaders. And this was an exemplar that she wanted to strive to be, which unbeknownst to her, if she looked in the mirror, she's already there. And so I'm very, very happy to introduce and present to the Edmonton Lean Community of Practice your speaker for today, the Director of Integrated Infrastructure Services at Edmonton Public Schools, Terri Gosine. Terri, on to you.
Wow, thank you. I've never been introduced quite so nicely, I don't think. But thanks, Avel.
You make it easy, Terri.
Well, thank you.
If I had to introduce Shafraz, it'd be very short.
Yeah.
There he is.
Yeah, there's probably lots of stories you could still tell. So I'm going to present my screen and present a PowerPoint if I know what I'm doing here. There we go. And then hopefully this works. Does that work?
Sure does.
Okay, so I can't see you guys anymore when I do this because for some reason it won't split my screen. So just let me know. You'll have to shout if I need to do something. So I'll just start. So yes, my name is Terri Gosine, and I'm the Director of Integrated Infrastructure Services at Edmonton Public Schools. Just a little bit of background on Edmonton Public Schools. We have about 105 students and about 215 operational school buildings. Integrated Infrastructure Services, my department, is about 250 to 300 employees, depending on the time of year. And our goal is to maintain our buildings from cradle to grave. So why did we start with IPD? Well, I mean, our story basically starts with about 2017, we opened 11 schools at once, which is a lot of schools to open at one time, because you can't stagger them across the year. You're doing that for September 1st, no matter what. All of these schools were traditional design bid build or design build through the province. But basically what we noticed was that when you build a school through design bid build, you've got everybody pulling in different directions. You definitely don't all agree on what your values or your targets are. So, here's some of the schools that we built. And, they're successful schools, but through the traditional procurement methods that we used at that time, it was definitely a race to the bottom. In other words, as we opened these schools at the tenders, it just kept getting lower and lower in the prices. And as an owner, you know what that puts you up for, right? So the average number of change orders on these schools, and these are greenfield sites, so they shouldn't have a lot of change orders, was over 100, which we all know directly correlates with the low bid. We also had some delay claims related to these schools that have only just recently settled. So lawsuits came out of these as well. So we just figured there just has to be a better way of doing things. This just doesn't work. So in 2019, we opened our first IPD school, which is Mill Creek. And I actually did these out of order, but there's Mill Creek right there. Then we did Thelma, Shalafu, and Soraya Hafez that opened in 2020. And then we did 5 schools where we opened them through IPD in 2021. And that was Dr. Ann Anderson, the high school you see in the bottom here, which actually had a partnership with the city of Edmonton, and they participated in our IPD. And then we had Garth Worthington, Alita Patterson, and Alex Janvey in 2021. All of these projects were successful. They were completed early. Dr. Ann Anderson, which was the biggest high school we've ever built, was finished in February before it opened in the September. So I don't think I've ever had that happen. Usually we're kind of finishing construction right about the time that the teachers need to move in. So it just allowed us the opportunity to really make sure that that school was ready for kids on September the 1st. All of them were either on or under budget. But the most successful part was that we had genuinely engaged and collaborative teams as we worked through these schools. Such a different feeling than working on a design bid build school. But as most of you know, we don't get new schools very often. It's pretty rare, especially lately. So we don't always get new schools, so that that is not our main work at Edmonton Public in this department. That's our main work, which our buildings are old. We have some over 100-year-old buildings, but our average age of school is over 50 years. We have almost $1 billion in deferred maintenance. So in 2020, just after COVID hit, our province announced the Getting Albertans Back to Work and a stimulus funding package where we got about $34 million handed to us. Now, of course, they gave us some restrictions. They gave us, it had to be projects that we could capitalize. So of course it had to enhance the longevity of the building. We had 6 months to spend $34 million, which by the way is impossible. And we had to prove that we were getting Albertans back to work. I only have limited staff. I think I have about 12 project managers. I do have a lot of maintenance teams, but they were already pretty much committed to their work. Timing was awful. This was announced in May and it had to be spent by October, November. So to be able to actually facilitate moving $34 million through, if we did the tender process, it was pretty much impossible. And of course, we want our work to be happening during the summer, during July and August. and we didn't get the news until May. So very difficult to turn things around very fast. Plus, our typical project load for our project managers is about, this is what one project manager will typically carry. So projects funded by schools, about 18. CMR, which was this getting Albertans back to work, they were managing about 37 of those at a time. And then IMR, which is our other funding source, they were managing about 43. That's a lot of work for one person to manage, and then throwing this 6-month timeline on them was very difficult. So we decided, you know, hey, why not? Why not try, that was weird, why not try IPD? To be honest, I actually at the time didn't actually think this was going to work. I didn't think anything smaller than $10 million. So Mill Creek was our first IPD project, and it was worth just about $11 million. And it was tough. It was difficult work for us to find value and ways to be efficient with our dollars in that project. So I thought, geez, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this when it's maintenance work? But we decided we would start an IPD worth about $5.8 million. It had a very tight schedule. We asked them to be complete by November. It had 13 schools, so it was located across the city. Multiple scopes from architectural upgrades, plumbing replacements. We did an automotive lab. We did a whole bunch of things. And we had a fixed budget. We knew the total that we could get to was the $5.8 million. So we needed a team that could be very collaborative and be very, very flexible in order to be successful. So some reasons why we chose to try this is, well, I mean, really, and I'm sure I'm probably speaking to the choir here, but there's a lot of reasons why traditional construction doesn't work. Schedule, just comparing the two, when you look at a design bid build, we all know what this has to go through, right? You have to initiate it, you do schematic design, you go through design development, then you tender it, and then you finally get to construction. Well, each one of these takes time. The tender, because I'm a public money here, it's a minimum of 3 weeks. So, you know, that's just one very small piece of this. But when you do IPD, look at that. You start with a tender and you gather your team, then you go through your target value design, and then construction starts. But construction can even start when you're not quite finished design. So you can see how this for us was a huge win when we only had 6 months to spend the money. Budget. So under design bid build, this is what I think the budget looks like. I think it's a wall. It's incredibly unbending. There's a tender price, whatever that is, and then everything after that is a change order. And I know we all love change orders. But here is what I think IPD looks like. The budget is fluid. So we did have a fixed total budget. It was $5.8 million, and that did not change. However, what we were able to do under IPD is we were able to decide which schools needed which amount of money. So we had a fairly good idea when we first went into it. It's not at all what it looked like by the end. They moved money around based on what they found after they scoped things out and they dealt with the details. You wouldn't have that happen in a design bid build because we would have had to have tendered every school separately. Or even if we had bundled them as 13 projects together to one general, any movement or change of scope, or as we detailed these things out, we would have had to have done a change order. So in IPD, we were able to reallocate the funds around the 13 schools. Scope. Under a design bid build, as I've said before, this is what you get. You get the contract, and then you get a whole bunch of change orders. And we were used to change orders. Like I said, we had over 100 change orders in some of our brand new school builds. So imagine what it's like working in a 50 or 60-year-old building. But here's what you get when you're building your scope for your IPD projects. You build your scope that you know you're going to do, and then you get a wish list. And this is actually a wish list from one of our schools. We were working with Suzuki Charter School. We did a project for them through IPD for $2.3 million just after we started our CMR one. And I mean, look at the list that they asked for, and they actually got quite a few things out of this. Obviously not all of them. We only had $2.4 million. Some of the things that we learned as we worked through this IPD project were to keep some of the tools from your bigger projects. So we had already learned the value and the importance of pull planning, and that we use, well, actually we use it here in my job now almost every day. That is probably one of the tools that we think is the most valuable that we learned out of IPD. We started off with a value and behaviors exercise. We called it a SMART start. We spent about half a day working with our team, but not only did we have the contractors and the architects and us from facilities there, we also had the schools there. So they understood what we were working towards. They understood the roles, they understood their own responsibilities, and they were actually able to give us a lot of information just in that half day around their values and what they wanted to see out of these projects. I don't think we've ever done a conversation like that with a school, and a lot of them were really they found a lot of value in it because they also built relationships with the people that were going to be at their school doing the work. We got a lot of buy-in from school admin, and we started those relationships. Some of the other things we learned is that when you're working in a traditional project, there's a lot of silos, right? We design the building, and the contractor doesn't have any say in it. And then the contractor gives us a price, and then it's arguments between people. So we spend a lot of time moving information back and forth. Change orders, RFIs, all of those things are just paperwork. So IPD helped us lean that project up. There was a lot less rework. So here's a great example. So this was one of our schools that we were doing some work in. One of the things that the school noticed was that it was a little bit dark in this classroom. We were already working in there. We already knew our scope and everything. So if you're talking about a traditional design bid build type of project, we would have had to have had an RFI, and then we would have had to do a CCO with a drawing of where the lighting was to go. Then we would have had to have got that priced, and then we would have got a change order, and then finally we would have got the lights. In IPD, we had a conversation, and within, I think, about 4 hours, look at that, we had more lights. Just there, that's huge efficiencies, but it also reduces all that time spent wasted going back and forth with paper. The other thing we learned a lot about is culture, and we learned this on our big IPDs as well. So I could really talk about the culture that IPD brings and working in a lean environment brings, probably for hours, because it is so important, and it really is the reason why IPD is successful. So make sure if you're going to do an IPD project that you spend the time that you need to spend building the culture. You know, do things together, get to know each other. It's very, very important. And include the owner. You know, a couple of our IPD projects, we went and did some stuff off hours. You know, they've done go-kart racing, and we've done cooking together, and we've done all those kinds of things just to build that culture. And the owner, we were there, and we actually even once did one where we went and cooked with some kids at a school. So we even included the end users at one point. So a little story here. This painting that you see was done by some of our kids from a division center. So we have some special classrooms where we have some autistic children. And in this particular school, we were building them a new space. So when their space was all cleared out, we got them to come in, and they did graffiti all over the walls. And they just loved doing that. That was so much fun for them. And then we renovated their space and kept some of that graffiti as highlight points for them. And they were so excited when they moved back in. But just those little things, you don't get that in any other type of delivery method because you just don't have that buy-in from the team. Some of our, I mean, did everything go right? Not always. We definitely learned. The Plan, Do, Check, Act is really, really important, and we still think it is super important to go slow to go fast. So start off slow, spend your time building culture, building the team, and building the scope and an understanding of the project before you start really digging into construction. So take the time to do your validation. And even in a project that is only 6 months long, still do that. There was a couple of places we maybe moved a little too fast and had to do some rework, which none of us like to do. The importance of communication is always there, but when things move as fast as they needed to, and for this particular project, we didn't keep our communication going quite as fast as we should have, and so there was a couple of places where that just didn't work very well. So keep that communication open always. But the question is, were we successful with this? Of course, yes, very much so. So here's some before and afters from these projects. But basically, so in terms of schedule, we did not meet the 6-month goal, but we actually knew we weren't going to meet it right off the start, but we did do it, I think, in 8.5 months, which is pretty impressive for $5.8 million across schools that were occupied with children. Budget, we did not end up under budget because every single dollar that we saved money on, we drove right back into the project, but we were able to add about $200,000 in items that we didn't think we would be able to add at the beginning. So we found a lot of efficiency to be able to do that. And flexibility, I mean, just the fact that we were able to really move money around within the projects and make sure that we hit our goals for each project, that was really key to why we believe that these were successful. Here's a couple more photos of what it looked like when we were done. And this is basically the end, but I can tell you that since we did this in 2020, we've actually completed about four or five more CMR IPD projects like this, where we've done them across multiple schools with small budgets, some as small as $2.4 million. We've also done a solar IPD where we actually didn't even have a general contractor or an architect. We went straight to the electrical contractor and electrical consultant as our colleagues on that team, and that was so successful. And again, all of them are ahead of schedule and meeting their budgets and adding extra value to each project. So as long as I'm allowed, I'm going to keep using IPD in my construction projects. So that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Terri. I'm delighted that there'll be lots of questions and lots of discussion now that we have time for that. So again, as Avel mentioned at the beginning, can you use your raised hand function? And I see Stephen already is on the ball with that, so I'll let him jump in.
Thanks, Shafraz. Terri, IPD has been described as having a very steep learning curve at the beginning. As an owner, just getting into the process, obviously you're well into it now and loving it, but at the beginning, how did you feel about that learning curve, and how did you navigate that as not only an owner but a public entity as well?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely has a steep learning curve. And Shafraz can speak to it. He was with me at Mill Creek. So, and all of us really were learning by then. I mean, Shafraz's team was the only team with any experience in IPD at that point. The contractor didn't have any, and we definitely didn't have any. So it was a steep learning curve. I will tell you that I've learned that having a facilitator helps, at least at the beginning. Somebody who does know what they're doing helps. Knowing as you go into it that you need to put the time in to do some training, and the team needs to commit to that. So one of the things that I was really proud of with Mill Creek and the first and the second one that we did was that the teams were willing to put the time in and not charge the project for their learnings, because in the end it helps everybody. You know, we all were so excited to be doing this that some of us put a couple of days worth of training in and nobody charged the project, because that was a tight budget, Mill Creek for sure. So yeah, I mean, use a facilitator and take the time to do the training. As far as being an owner and a public owner, I think I was just very, very lucky. We had just gone through litigation and a lot of change orders and overages. So convincing the trustees and my superintendent to do this was easy, because they also were like, there's got to be something better. If you don't have that, all the bad news kind of supporting you, it might be hard to convince people, because people think this is risky. Until you really understand it, I can see why people think it's risky. It's not. In fact, I think it's less risky than anything else I've ever done. But I don't think people understand that at the beginning. So yeah, training is really, really key. And we actually put our trustees through training as well to get them to understand what it looks like. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. I'll give Terri a question from the chat. Jason Chang said, "Can you explain CMR IPD?" So,
sorry, I use acronyms way too much in my job and I forget about them. So CMR is just the funding that we had from the province. So it just standard for capital maintenance renewal. So it was just, that's what we call them. So it's just funded by that source. That's all. Sorry.
In our big rooms, we often have a poster called 3-letter acronyms. So we'll add that to the list. His follow-up question was, what contract form did you use? And then
when we first started, the CCDC30 was not in existence. It didn't exist. So we paid for the Howard Ashcraft contracts, but we now use CCDC30.
Brilliant. And Bonnie, you were next in line.
Thank you. Thank you, Terri. That was a really inspiring presentation, and it's really awesome to see so much leadership in the city here in IPD. And I was really excited to see the smaller budgets of your projects. I'm very curious to expand, you did mention there was a big solar project that you did, but all of the projects, I'm assuming, had to meet the province's LEED and sustainability requirements. Does anything stand out to you in terms of value from that you got on these projects, considering all of the restraints that you had?
You know what? There's just so many. The solar project, I think our biggest win in the solar project, and if there's anybody from Calgary on here, I'm very sorry, but the Calgary Public Schools were doing the same project as us. So solar, it was worth about $6 million. We both got grants in order to do that. Our IPD project, we ordered our solar panels, I think about 3 weeks after we signed our contract, and our solar panels arrived and they're all installed. And Calgary's, I think they're still waiting for some. So just the fact that they had to wait, go for tender and get but we ordered ours because we knew that it might be iffy on getting them. So those little wins, they can be huge in the end, right? So yeah, that's one of my favorite stories because we beat Calgary, and that's,
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Terri, I think the biggest flex there was that we were able to design to the product, and rather than selecting the product and procuring to the design. And it was also at the time when all the tariffs were going on and boats were locked in ports everywhere. And so we specifically picked a product that we could get to land and not have all the increases. And I believe our savings was on the racking we pulled in, we saved 7% on the racking, and I think we saved 80 grand on the mods because it was in the middle of an influx of prices rising and everything, and we were able to lock that in right away because IPD allows you to pull those funds ahead. Whereas otherwise you'd be asking the contractors to carry that burden over the time until they were installed, and nobody wants to finance that period of time. So another way to speak to the flexibility of IPD.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey from Altipro, who helped on the electrical contractor side, installing all of that awesome stuff. Another question from the chat, Tracy asks, what percentage of your time was spent in a big room setting?
Myself personally, so the first few projects, I'm not gonna lie, I'm quite an involved owner and director, and I probably am not supposed to be. My boss tells me that all the time, but I do love these projects so much. They're kind of my, what is it? Eco Ammo calls it.
Your pet projects?
Well, they're like my, what is it they use?
Well, they're your keen interest.
Yeah.
Versus, yeah.
Versus, you know, paperwork that I hate. So the first few projects, I would say I was there at least a day and a half a week, maybe more at the beginning. But now, sadly, I don't get to go to very many at all. But I do, when I assign a project manager to it, it's depending on the size of the project, at least a day a week. Yeah.
Yep, it's a bit of a heavy lift, especially you're learning. And yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. It's your jet fuel.
That's the word. That's it. Yes, it's my jet fuel for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I'll ask Christina to ask her question next.
Hi, great presentation, Terry. I wanted to ask you though, knowing what you know now about IPD, what would you have told yourself at the beginning?
Well, I would have told myself to start it about 10 years earlier. That's the first thing I probably would have told myself. I think I would have spent more time in training at the beginning. For sure.
How much time did you spend?
Geez, do you remember, Shafraz?
Well, we tried to pair lean training and IPD orientation in the big rooms. So it took probably an hour every big room to sort of give people sort of, hey, here's a new tool. Here's how to do sort of a look at the 8 wastes. Here's how to do sort of the pull planning. So we tried to break things up into bite-sized chunks. You know, people weren't overwhelmed in the beginning learning the process.
Yeah, and then for Soraya Hafez and Thelma Shalif, which was our second, I think we had about 4 days of training, hey, Jeffrey? Yeah.
Yeah, it was 4 days, but the 4th day was fairly project intense. I think the 4th day was actually to the project charged. The first 3 days were the non-chargeable, just learning days. And then because of how it evolves, by the 4th day, it was actually work that was done to develop the project basis and work on the project as well as learning. And then, but that wasn't it, right? We continued again. Every big room, there was another hour of topic every 2 weeks or every week, and then every 2 weeks, and then that petered off. But the passive learning, just being in the big room, is always going on.
Yeah. That very first meeting is usually a boot camp style session. While we try to give you all of the things you need to know in one big chunk, but then break it out. But yeah, it's all part of the process, learning on the fly. Marwa.
Thanks.
You're up next.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Terry, for the presentation. And it's so great to see that Mill Creek is one of those successful projects. And thank you, Shafraz, for setting those meetings. This is my first time to join here. So I worked on Mill Creek for quite a bit of time, and it was really great experience to be in that project and so easy to be proud of. My question for you, Terry, is just like per your experience on all IPD projects, like what is the similarities or differences working on a school on the other IPD projects that is school, and what is the lessons learned and what you could have do differently for future projects to make it a more successful IPD experience?
What can I do differently? So I would say what is similar between all of the projects is the relationships and the team building and the culture. We've been very lucky. All of our IPD projects have been amazing. Just lights out. And I keep saying every one of them gets better and better and better, but I'd still go back to the first one and do it again. So the teamwork is just incredible. What I would say I've learned that I would do differently. You know what? I would say the biggest learning, and I see there's a question about this, was how to tender this. So the first time we tendered as one large team, where the whole team kind of had to predetermine who they, and then they came as a package. I don't like doing that anymore. I wouldn't do that again, purely because it's basically who answers the phone call first. So it's not really I don't think we build our best teams that way, because if you answer the phone call first, you've already committed to that person, but maybe that's not the best person to work with Edmonton Public. So I personally so we do a waterfall method now. So we start, I like to start with the general contractor. I think they have the biggest, for a big scope anyway, they have the biggest impact on schedule and budget. So we start with them, then they join us when we pick the prime consultant, and then they join us when we pick the next, and usually we'll go through mechanical, electrical, structural, civil, that kind of thing. So I actually prefer that, because then we're part of picking every part of that team, and we pick the absolute best fit for the project and for working with us. I think there's a key piece to building that culture in picking that best fit.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Answered more than Marwa's question. So I think that selection process one was covered. Let's see here. Next in the chat, Cherry, do you want to ask your question? More about challenges. Tell us more about your challenges.
I really don't like answering challenges because there weren't very many, which tells a lot for IPD, because I can talk about challenges in design, bid, build probably for weeks. It's just so hard because everybody is driving to the same direction that, yeah, we can disagree on something, but I don't remember having any meetings where the disagreement wasn't figured out within one meeting. Because we all remember what we were pointed towards and what our values were. Because you spend so much time building your values, and that's what you use to make decisions. It's so different than the decision making being based on cost. I don't think on any of our projects cost was a value, which is funny because I'm public money, and they ended up under budget. That's just an outcome. But we did not. I'm sorry, we didn't have a lot of challenges.
Awesome.
I do know what your challenge is, Terry.
What?
Going back to the projects on other contracts.
Oh my God, you're right. You're right. Going backwards is very hard.
Yes, and that is kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing, is wanting to always be in an IPD space. Cecilia has a question in the chat. What Lean tool was used for work prioritization and control?
What? Oh, geez. Depends on the project, I would say. We definitely got better at this. Pull planning was a big one once we were in construction, but actually we did pull plan even design. which is fun. Try to teach, I hope there's not too many architects on here, but trying to teach architects how to pole plan is kind of amusing. But they got there. And what other tools did we use? We used a lot of like Big Room, where we spent a lot of time together, a lot of wall space. Like if you're going to do an IPD, have a lot of wall space that you can put stickies or whatever on, a lot of whiteboards. Definitely have all of those things.
We did some flow management stuff where we looked at processes and eliminating extra steps in processes like shop drawing review and figuring out ways to make that more efficient and more lean. So process review would be one of the, and I don't know if it's like a tool specifically, but a lean tactic, I guess, not so much a tool.
Yeah, we also did a lot around like wastes, mostly like wastes in steps. Right? Like just figuring out, you know, does this need to go back and forth 50 times or should it just start over here? Those kinds of conversations were definitely lean tools. Does that answer?
And also having lean suggestions and lean topics on every meeting, every big room, right? And having a lean suggestion box and sharing out the lean, you know, even 2-second lean practices across the trades or in the design stages, everything. So not so much a tool, but more lean focused, I guess.
Yeah, one of our contractors actually had like a lean waste board sitting in the middle of the construction site that people could just write ideas on that they would look at every morning. There was that one too. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll keep going with questions from the chat here. Cora asks, if you were to do projects again, would you look at other green building standards, i.e. WELL?
So I don't actually know very much about WELL, but absolutely. So we have an environmental team now that's working on corporate climate leadership, and like, because we all know like these costs are just going up and up for our buildings. So yeah, for sure we would be looking at, and a couple of our projects, building a green building was a value. Now we're mandated to do lean. LEED. We are mandated to do that by the province, so we do have to do that, but we try to go above and beyond that as we can.
For sure. And another from University of Alberta, PMO. Can you speculate if the budget success was a result of IPD planning process or a result of being flushed with funding?
That's just, okay, come on. Like anybody who gets money from the public knows there's no flushed with funding. No, right. It was 100% IPD planning process and finding efficiencies in how we work. 100%.
Yeah, it's that whole design to a detailed budget and maximize what you can get out of that, I believe. So yeah. I'm just trying to get people who haven't asked questions first before I go back to people who are asking multiple questions. Sunil asks, IPD during and in the post-pandemic environment, how well does IPD work with remoting, working from home? Basically, he's seen benefits typically come from the big room and having everyone in the same room in time for discussions and decision making. So,
in general, I would agree. Being in person and having everybody together, I still believe is the best way to do it. But I mean, we were building 5 new schools plus some of these smaller IPDs during the 2 years of COVID, and we managed it. They found new ways of creating. They learned how to put stickies on a computer screen rather than a wall. Like they were able to do it, and it worked. But I personally would choose to be in person if we get and to spend that time together, because the relationships you build are still stronger. Jeff, I know you want to say something.
it's kind of a loaded question, Sunil, because
I know it is.
it's just I was on two separate projects at the same time, very similar projects, one IPD, one standard delivery, both having challenges with going to remote and local, being construction was active throughout, having to manage the requirements of COVID through the construction process, cost and delayed and slowed down and affected the other project quite a bit. On Garth Worthington with EPSB, we had we tracked what we thought was the effect so that we could maybe tell that story back to the province, but realistically we only had 1 week of shutdown from a COVID case on site, and otherwise we were not affected. And the communication level, because the relationships were developed pre-COVID, the relationship communication online was so much better in the IPD meetings than the other project where everyone has cameras off, totally disengaged. I have to be here, I'll just be there. Whereas everyone else in the IPD project was engaged and cameras on and actually inputting and trying to solve problems actively. So
that's a really good way to answer that, though, is the strength of the relationships before you're remoting is, yeah, I really like the way you said that, Jeff. That's good to know.
Great. Another question from the chat, going back to Jason, did the school board have to convince the procurement department to adopt IPD?
Yes. They were probably the hardest group to convince. But I mean, we still publicly tender, right? It still goes out for public tender. It's still, you know, there's still the procurement process. So yes, we did have to convince them, but they got there fairly quickly. I think it's partly because our CFO is fantastic and he got it first. What they don't love that we don't have change orders. They do not love that. And I can tell you our lawyers don't love it either. But they're also starting to understand why we do it.
Absolutely. I'm working on a large project in Ontario where lawyers just don't know what to do with this at all. And it's like, how come this isn't what we think we can do? And how come we can't bill more hours to this because there's no change orders and fights and arguments and adversarial relationships? So.
And what do you mean we can't sue? What?
Yeah.
Why would you say that? Because it's actually a good idea.
You're gonna put the lawyers out of business. Okay, back to another repeat question asker. Cecilia asks, do you have a lesson learned system? Where can anyone go back and find lessons learned after a while and analyze them? So great question about continuous improvement.
And very good question. And I'll admit we are really bad at it. So it is something we're trying to build here, but we definitely don't have it. The lessons learned comes in the brains of those of us that have done enough of these now. And we're, you know, like, so yeah, no, we don't do a good job of that. That is one thing we definitely need to work on.
For sure. There's a lot of tracking and I guess systems we use within, you know, action logs or sort of the plus delta logs. We should actually build a whole resource library, an online, here's what we've learned for everyone.
Yeah.
Awesome. New question asker, Jeff Smith asks, do you think IPD will get more attention by Alberta infrastructure now that they have said P3s won't be used for school delivery?
You know what, I can't, I have no idea. I doubt it. My conversations with Alberta infrastructure about IPD have not gone very well. I think their legal department believes it is too much of a risk. It did not show up in the capital planning manual as an approved method of delivery. It's considered a special method. So I'm not necessarily holding my breath. But hopefully we, you know, the government does change every 4 years, so you never know. I hope somebody realizes how good this is.
Well, the proof's in the pudding.
Absolutely.
Going to Tracy now, did you find the CCDC30 fit the model of delivery, or did you have to customize it with amendments?
We did make some amendments, but mostly to do with public, like there wasn't a lot. We quite like the CCDC30. We were actually asked for input when they were building it, so maybe that's why. But so we did do a couple. I think we had to do something around holdbacks because that's specific to Alberta. But the CCDC30 we found does fit pretty much.
And we're coming down to almost an hour on this and some great discussion. Let's see here. Stephen, back to your question. Moving from a heavily managed design build or DBB type process to a more jointly managed IPD involves giving a bit of control and trust to the process. Did you struggle with the mental shift? And if yes, how did you move past it?
Do you know what? I don't know that I would agree with that. I would say, at least my experience with projects before IPD, we had less control and less ability to influence the outcomes. Aside from signing change orders, I don't feel like we had that much. I would say I felt more listened to and heard in an IPD project as the owner. Very rarely did things did anyone I would definitely get challenged on, when I would say something in an IPD, but they heard me and they would listen to what I was saying. They may end up doing it a different way, but yeah, I don't know that I would agree. I actually feel like in an IPD, the owner is because you're at the table for everything. I think you're actually heard more. Jeffrey, if you talk about teal.
Oh, there's a story there. Okay. Okay, tell the inside joke very quickly.
I hate teal. Because when I first started at Edmonton Public Schools, I swear every school we had was teal, because in 1990, that was the cool color to paint things. And I think 60% of our schools did. And when people find that out, apparently they like to take advantage of that. And I actually had my car covered with teal one time at an IPD meeting. So yeah.
Well, yeah, we got a little bit of teal in a DOS though.
Yes, but not because I wanted it. I got outvoted.
Fair enough. Jeff Hill asks, does the group have lean comments on IPD versus progressive design build? Yes.
I personally haven't done a progressive design build, so I'm not sure that I could directly compare the two.
I'm working on a couple right now. Progressive design build can actually borrow the language and the tools, obviously, of lean construction. And I think that's the point we should make is IPD can't happen without lean culture and lean tools. But you can actually take those tools and that culture and apply it to any other type of procurement or project. So we're doing a few progressive design builds where the owner was not able to utilize IPD because they couldn't get their leadership or their board behind adopting it. So the next best thing was to do progressive design build and throw in the language of, hey, instead of a Gantt chart and push schedule, we are pull planning. We are going to adopt lean techniques and tools that help make the project really work well. And basically, yeah, for those clients who are sort of in a stepping stone towards an integrated project delivery mechanism, that would be a good way. It does, the only hard part is it requires the contract to get very, very customized. to incorporate that. Anyone else want to comment on that? Okay. And basically, yeah. Thanks for the comment, Stephen, on progressive design build doesn't go far enough. True, like it doesn't contractually obligate for that no suing each other and actually insists on that culture within the contract. So, but it's the next best thing for now. With that, we're kind of coming up to the top of the hour. I'd have to say this has been the most engaging and most questions I've ever seen in a Lean Coffee in memory. And Terri, kudos to you. Normally we have sort of people join and then drop off. We've consistently had over 58 people from start to finish for this whole hour. So great presentation, amazing conversation to figure this all out. So thanks, Terri, for doing this and sharing your experience and being part of our Lean community of practice. We really appreciate your not just your leadership, but your advocacy for all of this, especially in building a Lean culture within Edmonton Public Schools. Before I let you all go, I dropped 2 links in the chat. Our Lean community of practice has a LinkedIn page where we will share the next event and the topics. And as Avel mentioned at the beginning, we meet the 3rd Friday of every month with a presenter or a Lean coffee style conversation to share tools, share lessons learned. Maybe that's where we gather all of our ideas, and stay tuned for our next speaker. If you'd like to join the sort of leadership of this community of practice, we're more than happy to have new voices, new ideas. So please let me know, drop it in the chat or contact me offline. We're always looking for speakers, topics, ideas, and could use help sustaining this whole organization and moving forward. So with that, that's our Lean Coffee for January and the new year. So we're off to an amazing start. So again, thank you all for joining us, and stay tuned for February. We'll see you then.
Thanks again, Terri. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me. Jeez.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, glad to see how everything's tracking along, and well, hopefully have you join as a listener or a commenter. It was great to have Jeffrey sort of here to be a ad hoc panel of sorts. So
yeah, no, that was helpful.
That's great.
That's helpful. Yeah.
We record these sessions, so I'll send you the link. You could share with people and share the story as well. It'll be on the YouTube channel we have. So
excellent. Just what I've
stay
always
tuned.
wanted.
Thanks, Jeffrey, as well. We'll see you later.
Bye, guys.
About a week.